Chapter 10. Demetrius Labanus liked Joseph better and better. The actor was no longer young. His life and his art demanded a great deal of energy. It seemed to him that he drew new inspiration from the ardor of his youth from Jerusalem. And had not Joseph also been the cause of his giving to the world at long last his great and dangerous idea, the representation of the Jew Apella? He asked Joseph more and more often to his house. Joseph laid aside his provincial manners, and with his quick brain soon learned the nimble and adroit worldly wisdom of the capital, and became a man of the world. From the literary men whom he came to know through the actor, he learned something of their technique and the jargon of their profession. He had political and philosophical talks with men of importance. He had love affairs with women, with girl slaves as well as women of the aristocracy. He lived very pleasantly amid the esteem of his friends. Nevertheless, when he was alone, he was often overcome by a gnawing feeling of dissatisfaction. He knew, of course, that the amnesty of the three men could not be secured in a day, but now weeks and months had passed, and he still waited and waited as he had done in Judea. The uncertainty gnawed at him, and he had to put great control upon himself to retain his air of confidence. Claudius Reginus had asked him to send him the memorandum which had made such an impression on the empress. Joseph sent it, and waited with agitation for the decision of the great publisher. But the publisher remained silent. Joseph waited for 4 long weeks. Reginus still remained silent. Had he given the manuscript to Justus to read? Joseph grew uncomfortable when he thought of the cool, keen face of his rival. At last Reginus invited him to supper. The only other guest was Justus of Tiberias. Joseph was on his guard. He smelt a plot. He had not long to wait. After the first course, his host remarked that he had read the memorandum, a remarkable gift for form, but the content, the argument, was feeble. Justus, too, had written, at the request of King Agrippa, his judgment on the case of the 3 men. Would Justus be kind enough to outline his views? Joseph's knees trembled. Suddenly the opinion of all Rome seemed to him unimportant, as compared to that of this countryman of his, Justus of Tiberias. Justus did not let himself be asked twice. The case of the 3 men, he said, could not be treated except in relation to the Caesarean affair. The Caesarean affair could not be treated except in relation to the whole imperial policy in the Orient. Ever since Corbulo had commanded in the East, Rome had made concessions in appearance, but never in actual fact. With all respect to Joseph's gift for form, he did not think that his memorandum would have much effect on the imperial administration. Reports and suggestions from the finance ministry and the general staff would be more likely to do that. He, Justus, in the memorandum which, on the instructions of King Agrippa, he had sent into the ministry of the Orient, had insisted above all on the legal aspect of the Caesarean affair. He had referred to the example of Alexandria, where Rome had refused to yield to the intrigues of the anti-Semites, but he was afraid that the minister Talassos, who was in any case an anti-Semite and was probably bribed by the Greeks in Caesarea, would in the present case yield to the intrigues of the Gentile population in spite of all legal arguments, and from the point of view of the imperial policy in the Orient, unfortunately with perfectly good reason. Justus sat straight and direct on the banqueting couch. He spoke sharply, logically, urgently. Joseph listened, lying on his back with his hands clasped behind his head. Suddenly he sat up, leaned across the table towards Justus, and said with hostility, "It isn't true that the question of these men in the brickworks has anything to do with politics. It's a matter of justice, of humanity. It's simply for the sake of justice that I am here. Justice! That's what I've been shouting into people's faces ever since I've come to Italy. I've gained the empress over with my desire for justice." Reginus turned his fleshy face from the one to the other. He gazed at Joseph's lean, pale brown face, and then at Justus's lean, golden brown face. "Do you know, my friends," he said, "that you are very much like each other?" They were both taken aback. They scrutinized each other. The jeweler was right. They hated each other. "Besides, I'm in a position to tell you in confidence," Reginus went on, "that you're disputing about a case that's already settled. Yes," he said, looking into their dazed faces, "the Caesarean affair is decided. Some time may elapse before the edict is made public, but it is signed and dispatched to the Governor-General of Syria. You are right, Dr. Justus. The Caesarean affair has been decided against the Jews." The 2 young men stared with blank eyes at Claudius Reginus, who gazed sleepily in front of him. They were so downcast that they forgot themselves and their dispute. "This is the worst blow to Judea for more than 100 years, said Joseph. "I'm afraid blood will flow because of this edict," said Justus. They drank in silence. "See to it, Dr. Joseph," said Reginus, "that your Jews remain reasonable." "It's easy to say that here in Rome," replied Joseph, and his voice was full of anger. He sat humped up and slack, as if all the strength had run out of him. What this disgusting fat fellow had told him made him so sad that his heart had no room even for the humiliating feeling that he and his mission were equally ridiculous now. Of course his rival had been right. He had foreseen everything, and he, Joseph, had been merely building castles in the air, and his success was empty. Claudius Reginus spoke again. "In any case, I intend," he said, "just now before the edict is known, to publish your memorandum, Dr. Justus. You must hear this treatise." He turned with unaccustomed enthusiasm to Joseph. "It is a little masterpiece," and he begged Justus to read a chapter. In spite of his hostility, Joseph began to pay attention and soon was spellbound. Yes, compared with these clear, incisive sentences, his wretched melodramatic fulminations were not up to much. He gave it up. He renounced the whole business. He resolved to return to Jerusalem and find a modest post in the service of the temple. That night he slept badly, and next day he wandered around despondently. He ate little and without enjoyment, and he refrained from visiting the girl Lucilla with whom he had made an appointment. He wished that he had never come to Rome, that he was in Jerusalem still, ignorant of the iniquitous and dreadful things that were being hatched here against Judea. He told himself that probably what Reginus had said was mere rumor, but in his heart he knew that it was true. He knew the city of Caesarea well, its harbor, its great warehouses, its shipping companies, its synagogues, its bazaars and brothels, even the great buildings that the Romans had erected there, hated though they were, the residence of the governor, the colossal statues of Juno and the first emperor, the gymnasium. Even these enhanced the fame of Judea so long as the city was governed by Jews. But should the government fall into the hands of the Greeks and the Romans, the capital would become a Roman city, and then everything would be reversed. Then the Jewish population in all Judea, the population even of Jerusalem, would only be tolerated in their own country. When he realized this, Joseph felt the ground sinking under him. Dejection and rage filled him from head to foot, so that he felt physically sick.